Everybody, I'm Donald Toms, and welcome to what we're calling Public Television Oral History, where I get an opportunity to speak to some of the pioneers of public television. And I'm really happy today to talk to Michael Styer. And Michael Styer and I met here at Maryland Public Television in 1973. And so we're just going to talk today about his memories of public television and some of the extraordinary things he did in public television. And that's when he and I met. So, Michael, thank you for being here.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here, Donald.
So, give me a little bit of history. So, before you came to Maryland Public Television, you did what?
Well, I had graduated from Syracuse University in journalism, and then I worked for 10 years in commercial television in various places, in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, North Carolina, in Baltimore for a while too, over that 10-year period, but it was all commercial television. And I did everything from directing to producing, and I got into management later in those years. And then I had an opportunity to come to Maryland Public Television in 1973.
1973, it was called the Maryland Center for Public Television, or Public Broadcasting.
That's what it was called.
Right,
yes.
right. You know, back in the day. So you got here in 73, and your boss was who? Was it Warren Park?
Yes, it was.
It was Warren Park. So you were head of Arts and Cultural Affairs programs.
Yes.
Right? And how I kind of knew that is that when I got here, I was in master control. I was pushing buttons and putting all the programs on the air. And there was a lot of busyness going on here at the time. They were shooting Our Street, you know, one of the first black dramas on public television. And sort of within a couple of months, there were just a lot of different kinds of people in the building down in Studio A. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, what's going on down there? And someone said they're prepping for a new show called The Critic's Place.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, what is the Critic's Place? What was the Critic's Place, Michael?
Well, that was the first thing. That was I was trying to think, what in arts, what can I do? All kinds of things, and my idea was, let's just do a weekly program that covers the arts. They had a previous program, which was just basically an interview program, a half-hour interview program about the arts. And I didn't want us to continue to do that. I wanted to do something that I thought was maybe a bit more lively, and that we could cover all the arts. So the concept was, we had about 10 or 11 different critics. Each of them had a specialty, and they had a history in their specialty. And they would come together, and every week we wouldn't have 11 on, we'd have about 7 on every week, 7 or 8. And each one would have about 5 minutes to review 1 or 2 events or subject matters in their area. And we would send out film crews ahead of time to get some excerpts from shows or whatever they were doing, and that would be incorporated. They would come on, and each one would say what they liked or didn't like about a particular show or event. And then it would open up the discussion. We always tried to make sure that at least one of the other critics would go. And so we might have quite a discussion sometimes and disagreement, which made the show lively. And yet a lot of basic information got out about what was happening in Maryland in the arts that particular week.
Yeah, and so we were talking about dance, of the visual arts, music,
theater,
and
performing arts and books, and yes.
Yeah, and all kinds of music. I mean, there was the classical music person, then there was a popular music person. Yes. And it was interesting because, and why I got so interested in it is that the very first night of your premiere is that I had to put the show on the air. Mm-hmm. You know, press that button and boom, there's Alfie Brown welcoming people to the Critics' Place.
Right.
And so I had to be a part of it. So I walked in and watched a lot of it. And there was an AD there who was scribbling, you know, trying to keep time of the show. and to get you guys out on time because it was live.
It was a live show. It was an hour long originally.
Yeah.
In later years, it sometimes became a half hour, but mostly it was an hour show.
Yeah, and what happened was that the assistant director simply could not time the show, and so at about 5 or 6 minutes before the show, I went back and looked at the tapes to make sure they were all ready for the next show, and you guys weren't coming out, and so I got on headsets and said something like, "I'm sure you guys know you're coming out in 5 minutes," and there was pandemonium in the control room because you guys thought you had more time than you did.
Not the producer.
Not the producer. And so I kind of counted him out, and then I guess after 2 weeks of him not quite doing it, you asked me to be the assistant director on the show. And the cool thing about The Critics' Place is that it was produced and aired on a Thursday, which for most people in public television know, that is local stations night. So PBS does not feed programs or does not broadcast on Thursdays. And because it was a Thursday night, it gave the audience time, if they wanted to get tickets to a performance of dance or a show, they could do it. It was a perfect scheduling moment, and it became a massive hit, on public television. And I think I became the director after like 2 years because the director, Colin Campbell, left and went someplace else, and the show continued on for a long time. But then, before we talk about your next success, what I'm curious about is that having worked at a commercial station, you came to public television in its infancy almost. And public television was still trying to figure out what it was. What did you think? Because you had done mostly commercial television.
Well, I came to public television because it presented a wonderful opportunity to come to this particular job in that Warren Park and Rick Breitenfeld, who was the president, told me, they said, you can do anything you want. I thought, wow.
Oh my God.
In commercial television, I was sort of assigned to things and do them. And I said, wow, I can do anything I want. So that was very, very promising. And they gave me a nice, healthy budget to work with, too. So I thought, well, okay, so that's when I had to figure out what do I want to do as the first show. And I just thought that covering the spectrum of the arts every week would be a really good way to start. And then we went on and did other kinds of programs. But that was, it was on for 12 years.
Yeah, I think you're right about public television, because when I got here, I had come from commercial station and in Master Control, and I had never seen so much diversity. I'd never seen so much creative energy in any building. And this place had 3 studios, and every studio was busy every day.
Absolutely.
And sometimes in the night, and doing incredible work. And I just never seen that before. And it was also back in the days where it appeared that public television had money, because producers were not asked to go out and find money for the shows.
Right.
No, someone approved that budget.
Yes.
But again, we had healthy budgets to work with. So after you did The Critics' Place, I'm trying to remember what could have been next.
Oh, wow. We did.
Well, because you also did a series. You
programs.
did a series of dramas.
Yes.
That you created in association with Baltimore Center Stage.
We did a couple of shows with Center Stage, first of all. And then after we had had that experience of doing some dramas, that were co-productions, we did 2 of them with Center Stage.
But shot.
Which was a local regional theater.
Yes, but
here
shot right here
Athens.
in the studios.
Yes, yes. And at that time we had a huge scenic department. And they built these incredible sets all the time. And so they were able to come up with anything we wanted. And so we did these 2 dramas, mostly interiors, although we had a remote truck that we also used to sort of set up the outside of a building, and then we'd come inside to the studio and to a wonderful set. And so we had done 2 of the shows with Center Stage, and then Center Stage had decided that they were very busy with their regional theater and decided to sort of get out of this business. And I thought, well, we have to continue in that success. So I created a thing called the the Maryland Playwrights Festival. And in that, what we actually did is we solicited scripts from playwrights in Maryland, or anyone who was a writer, and they actually didn't have to live in Maryland. If they passed through Maryland, they qualified. And so we got several 100 scripts, which we had to read and try to figure out what we could do with the kind of budget we had, and the fact that we'd only have 1 or 2 sets and they'd be mostly interiors, and also to keep the cast fairly small. I mean, under 10 people, and because we paid people their regular rates. We paid the regular rates of after SAG, although we weren't part of that. These actors, that's what they got, and we would pay them usually a minimum. But when you have a lot of them, it builds up in the budget. So anyhow, we ended up in reading, and I had a committee. I had a committee of some academic people, and also reading these scripts to try to figure out which were really good scripts. Some of them were actually adaptations of short stories or adaptations of other works. Some of them were original, but we selected 5.
Okay.
And we did 5, including 1 musical.
And Michael, do they stay local? These are
No, the wonderful thing about it was we did them to be, Maryland-based dramas, and on the Maryland Network, but we submitted them to PBS, and they all got accepted, and they all got aired in prime time on PBS. And that's why we won some awards with them, because they'd been on PBS and been on nationally. But it was a very exciting time. And
all right, so you did those great dramas. I remember I didn't get to work on any of those, but you did those great dramas. But then you did a program I remember called Happy New Year USA. Now, I'm not going to linear because I can't remember.
No,
the
that's
dates either.
right. Okay.
But you did those, and that was you did that for 3 or 4 years, and that was a live
These
show
were,
from downtown Baltimore, right?
Well, yes, because PBS always did New Year's Eve programming, but it would end at 10 o'clock at night with a show from WNET. And I thought, well, we should be on the air at midnight, and we should have an entertainment show. So we did that. We worked with Ethel Ennis and Earl Arnett, her husband, who had a downtown club, and we decided we're going to do New Year's Eve. We're going to get on the air about 11 o'clock, stay on to 1 or 1:30. We would have cameras in the Inner Harbor to also pick up the fireworks when it became midnight. But we brought in, again, I was given a nice budget by my bosses, and we brought in national talent to perform in these shows. Mel Torme became one of our hosts for the last 3 years. He was a very famous performer, cabaret singer at that time. And we had Rosemary Clooney on the show.
And those are quite special because it really was. It was shot at Ethel's place, and then directly across the street, the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra performed.
Well, they were always doing a New Year's Eve concert too. So yes, so we sort of tied in with that. We could run across the street. We had some cameras over there, and so we'd go back and forth, and it would really seem like a really big deal.
No, it was a big deal because I was one of the producers for it, and I remember at one moment in Ethel's place where the show opened, there were no lights. Somehow all the lights had been blown in Ethel's place, and so everyone was panicking. And I remember saying, "Let's not tell Michael yet," that there were no lights on in the studio, and so we moved the opening from Ethel's place to the Symphony,
Right.
and we did the opening there, and then the lights came on,
Right.
you know, at Ethel's place, so we could finish the show. But also,
Well, for a couple of those years, we also had some entertainment going on right there in the harbor.
Yeah, we
in the
did, ice skating.
harbor. Well, ice skating, but we also had some musical groups down there too. So
Yeah.
it was like back and forth, and it really, I thought, you know, was good for Baltimore, good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Maryland, for
Yeah, yeah.
the country
No, it
to
was.
see that, you know, we had something going on on New Year's Eve in,
That's
in
true.
Baltimore.
you know, so there was this incredible arts and cultural programs you did. But also, we created these outreach programs, because part of what public television does, especially local public television, is that it has to serve the community. And because if you're not serving the community, you might as well be a pass-through station for PBS. So the fact that we did Project Reach Out, which was a program where it looked like a pledge break, but what it was, instead of asking viewers to give money, we asked them to do what?
To pledge hours, volunteer hours, and it was like a big telethon.
It was.
That we did, and we would do it, for 3 or 4 hours in prime time.
3 hours in prime time locally, this locally, but we had major stars. But then we did Project Reach Out, and then we did one on jobs, where basically the same thing,
Yes.
looked like a pledge, but we're working with the state of Maryland.
Right.
And they put up their jobs list, and
Right.
people were calling. We did one show that I actually hosted about physical and mental abuse. And we had operators who were doctors and social workers.
Right.
And the phones lit up because we were helping
Right.
people at that moment. And then my wife said to me, "How come you don't do anything on foster care?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, honey." And she said, "Well, I think you should." And I said, "Then you go and pitch Michael."
Yes.
Knowing you were not going to say no to my
No,
wife.
I wouldn't say no to my-
You know,
no,
so she did pitch the show in foster care, and there we were. Is that we did stories about big names in Maryland who grew up in the foster care system, and again, the phones, you know, we got people to, you know, to become foster care parents.
Right.
I mean, that was a pretty illustrative career of yours, not only for the arts and culture.
I also produced sports programming.
Here,
Yes, we did. We did. The station had been doing a big. It was always a big tennis tournament in
that's
Salisbury,
right.
Maryland,
Right,
every
right.
year, and they had done 1 or 2 years. And then when I came in, I sort of inherited that, and so we did that, and that was aired all over the country also. Because we had Jimmy Connors, we had a
my
lot of
Lord,
the
I
big
remember that,
stars,
yeah.
you know, and so we did that, and I also did a lacrosse series, yeah, I was. We sort of stretched the arts into. All
sure, but
kinds of
I
arts,
can remember because I was one of your executive producers towards the end, and I would get a note from you that says, "Oh, by the way, the country music show that's been on the air for so and so years is going away. I need you to produce a country music show." I said, "By when?" You said, "Like 3 weeks."
Yes.
So we did New Country Video that was done right here, and then the other one was the Port of Baltimore. We did very quickly, but also the Baltimore Sun was having its 150th anniversary, and you said, "Oh, by the way, they just called and we need an hour documentary on the Baltimore Sun." I said, "When?" 8 weeks. So we did a bunch of stuff, but before I end your career at MPT, I just want to also say that after you left MPT, you did what?
I went to PBS. I joined you at PBS
That's
for
right.
a half a year.
Half a year.
Half a year.
And then,
And then I was offered another job back here in Baltimore because I didn't really like the commute from Baltimore the whole way down to Virginia to do that every day, although it was an enjoyable job. And I worked down there. I worked on pledge programs, entertainment pledge programs, producing those. But then I had an opportunity to come back to Maryland to another state position. Pension, all that stuff.
are you going to tell us what it is, or are you just going to drag it out?
Well, yeah. As the head of the Maryland Film Office, and our job was to bring film projects to Maryland, TV and film projects, and once they were here, to make sure that they were treated by everyone very well, and that we got all the local people who worked in the field jobs. And yeah, we did. I think there was 20-some in 9 years. We had 20-some projects. Some of them series, some of them just one-time films.
Yeah. I mean, you did some big movies, but anyway, so we're going to wrap this up. But it's been really fun going over memory lane because as it turned out, I mean, I was your director for a while, and then I got promoted to a producer, and I went to somewhere else, and then you dragged me back to work with you as a producer, and then I got promoted to an executive producer, and then head of television. So you've had an amazing career.
And you were a big part of that.
Thank you so much, and I thank you for doing this for us. All right?
Thank you, Donald.
All right.